Welcome back to the program. David Malpass is the new president of the World Bank. If you remember very well, he was the candidate nominated by the U.S. President Donald Trump to head the global banking head. That's the World Bank with headquarters in Washington. One of the two Bretton Woods institutions created 75 years ago at the end of the World War II. So David Malpass was technically unveiled, as it were, this week at the World Bank IMF spring meetings ending this weekend in Washington. And yesterday he had his first press conference, and he spoke about the position of the World Bank that he's meeting on the ground on his resumption, which was just a couple of weeks ago, and of course what the situation of things are, not just globally, but in Africa. He says that per capita income growth in sub-Saharan Africa will remain sluggish at 1% at least until the year 2021. He also had a lot more to say about the strength of the World Bank to contain and defend, as well as support the global economy. Let's take a listen.
I'm honored to be joining you this morning as World Bank Group President. I'm also grateful to work with such a strong team of talented and dedicated development professionals. The World Bank Group plays an increasingly vital role in leading on global challenges that people face in developing countries. Our mission is clear and important. The bank's role is particularly important in poorer countries where the global economic slowdown that began last year hits people the hardest. Global growth lost momentum throughout 2018, falling to 2.7% in the fourth quarter, down from 3.3% in the first quarter, based on World Bank calculations. The deceleration was seen in both advanced and developing economies, and it coincided with three other warning signs: waning structural reforms in major economies, financial stress in some large emerging markets, and elevated policy uncertainty globally. On current trends, per capita income in growth in sub-Saharan Africa as a whole is now projected to stay below 1% until at least 2021, which elevates the risk of a further concentration of extreme poverty on the continent. Growth in median income will also be weak. This fact is extremely troubling because it jeopardizes the World Bank's primary goal of ending extreme poverty by 2030. Globally, extreme poverty has dropped to 700 million at the last count. That's down from much higher levels in the 1990s and 2000s. But the number of people living in extreme poverty is on the rise in sub-Saharan Africa. By 2030, nearly 9 in 10 extremely poor people will be Africans, and half of the world's poor will be living in fragile and conflict-affected settings. This calls for urgent action by countries themselves and by the global community. Fortunately, the World Bank Group is financially strong, and with the capital package, which was agreed to a year ago at the spring meetings and which I was proud to support, the organization is becoming even more responsive, efficient, and effective. This week at the World Bank Group, we at the World Bank Group have joined the IMF in welcoming our 189 shareholders to the spring meetings. I've already begun meeting with member countries and other stakeholders to discuss the challenges ahead and to advance the broader global development agenda. Well, these are huge challenges, ones that the World Bank is grappling with and that I want to take on. As we think about climate change, one thing to take note of is that it has its biggest effect often on the poorest people, so that adds to the challenge. As you know, the bank has goals under the Climate Change Action Plan, ones that I think are achievable in terms of addressing some of the effects of climate change, and that follows from mitigation types of lending and also adaptation types of lending, other innovative products that the bank can be involved in. As far as the digital economy, these are critically important for people to move to move forward quickly in terms of their economic development. So as in my opening remarks, I was talking about poverty. This is a key part a major part of the World Bank's vision and mission. And poverty reduction, it can be addressed, a big chunk of it, with markets that actually operate. So in the digital economy, the World Bank has programs that are trying to take some of the knowledge learned in East Africa to the West Africa side and other countries. So one of the things that I think can be done is look at successful stories and see if you can make them work elsewhere. To your third point, as far as China and as far as the buildup of debt, let me take a second, a few moments on that. Debt is something that helps economies grow, but if it's not done in a transparent way with good outcome from the debt, from the buildup of debt, then you end up having it be a drag on economies. And history is full of those situations where too much debt dragged on economies. So what we're trying to do, and the World Bank is a key part of the debt transparency project and the collection of data that has been encouraged by the G20. And so this is a project that we're working hard on. I'll be reporting to the G20 on the progress during our meetings coming up this week. And the keys are to have transparent disclosure of the debt as it's being created, and also then have the focus be on good outcomes in terms of quality projects. This is critical for poor countries as they try to move forward to have the projects associated with good quality programs and full disclosure of the debt. So I think this is an area that bilateral donors can do much better on, and it's something that the world can press on and say, look, this is the way to help countries get ahead in terms of their growth. So it's something the World Bank will be working hard on, and it's very important to those countries, to many countries. I've got a statistic here, 17 African countries are already at high risk of debt distress, and that number is just growing as the new contracts come in and aren't sufficiently transparent. Corruption efforts are a key part of designing good, transparent programs, and so illicit flows take many forms and are a big challenge, and they also suck resources away from poor people and from the ability of a country to really grow and develop. So it's something that the bank has the bank has not nearly enough, but expanding strength in helping people think about how to best keep track of financial flows and make sure that they're legitimate financial flows. This takes the form of technical assistance. It takes the form of close cooperation with the financial officials in the country, and it's something countries, I think, are rising to the challenge and trying to make it work better, but clearly more can always be done. I guess I'd like to put this into the context. I'm enthusiastic about the job that I've undertaken. I'm deeply honored to be here and to tackle these challenges. And as we've talked today, there's a wide range of challenges that the developing countries face and that the World Bank can work every day on to be as effective as possible. And the needs are urgent. As we talk about any of the countries that we mentioned today, this is something that I hope progress can be made this year and next year, even though I know it's such a daunting set of challenges.
David Malpass, the new president of the World Bank Group. The opposite of the World Bank president is the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. Of course, both of them sit at the head of the spring meetings. Christine Lagarde yesterday used her own press conference to speak to the state of the global economy and the momentum that we lost sometime in 2018. She also spoke about the trade tensions between Washington and Beijing and the impact that could have, as well as Brexit, on the global economy moving forward. At the tail end, she spoke about the need to remove fuel subsidy in Nigeria and why this is important to the country's public spending. Let's take a listen to Christine Lagarde, the head of the International Monetary Fund.
I'm not suggesting that the global economy is going through the 136 different iterations from synchronized growth to synchronized slowdown, but it feels a little bit like that at this point in time. And this uncertainty in nature that, by the way, will be commented upon by Sir David Attenborough at 12, a moment that I encourage you to attend, where he will talk about not just the beauty, but the peril of nature and how much damage is inflicted upon nature. But just like nature, the global economy is also currently quite uncertain. As I said, a year ago, we were talking about synchronized growth, and 75% of the global economy was going through that phase. As you heard a couple of days ago, we're now talking about synchronized slowdown by 70% of the global economy. So our forecast for growth this year is 3.3%, going back up, we hope, in 2020 based on our forecast to 3.6%. But we contend that we are at a delicate moment. And this expected rebound from 3.3 in 2019 to 3.6 in 2020 is precarious and subject to downside risks, ranging from unresolved trade tensions, yet high debt in some sectors and countries, both public and corporate, to the risk of weaker than expected growth in some stressed economies, and of course, the consequences of whatever Brexit will be. So, in terms of policy recommendations, what can be done about this moment of uncertainty and precarious possible pickup? I would suggest not a single policy, but multiple policies, because it will have to be country-specific and there is no one-size-fits-all. But we certainly would recommend two key principles. One is do no harm. Second, do the right thing. So do no harm. The key is to avoid the wrong policies. And this is especially the case for trade. We know that for many decades, trade integrations has helped boost productivity, innovation, growth, employment, and has reduced cost of living, particularly for the low-income people. At the same time, we know that the engine of growth needs to be fixed. We need to better address dislocations caused by trade and by technological innovation, however intertwined they are. And we need to do more for those who are left behind. We need to better address unfair trade practices and distortions in the system, including through a WTO system reform. And we need to avoid self-inflicted wounds, including tariffs and other barriers. So that was for the do no harm. Do the right thing. I would mention a few. First of all, when I said a year ago, the sun is shining, fix the roof. Well, fix the roof is still needed. And there are still many reforms that are outstanding and should be the focus of policymakers, because it would help boost potential output to prevent disappointing long-term growth in advanced economies, and it would help developing countries catch up with their wealthier peers, which is a process that we see slowing down at the moment. Second, create more room in order to resist the next crisis when the downturn comes. And that means enhancing resilience by making smarter use of fiscal policy and by strengthening financial sector policies and discipline. So, third one, to fix the roof, create more space for when the next downturn comes up, and tackle issues that have a high potential to boost not only revenue but also growth and inclusion. And such issues have been the focus of particular chapters in our publications in the last couple of days. They include reforming the international taxation system, in particular corporate taxation, which is the focus of our publication, strengthening competition framework, and above all, and this is going to be a lot of work in the months to come for us, fight corruption at both ends, supply and demand. And in all these efforts, we need stronger international cooperation. We need those policymakers that I would call the woman and the man for all seasons in order to resist that uncertainty that we have at the moment. And in order to quote Shakespeare now, in order to deal with the uncertain glory of this April day. So with that, you've seen our global policy agenda for 2019. And this is what I would like to finish with. If you look at it carefully, it's much longer than what we normally do in the spring. In the spring, we do a GPA update, Global Policy Agenda update, and the longer version of it is at the annual meeting. This one is longer because we try to focus on the various layer of what I have called this new multilateralism that we're calling for, which has domestic implications, cross-border implications, and international cooperation imperative, with a strong focus on the people. You will see that we are going to look at many of our policies, our guidelines, our methods, our operations, in order to provide in the next decade the best possible services for the membership. We are looking at our debt sustainability analysis. We're looking at our conditionalities. We are looking at improving our low-income country facilities. We're looking at a more comprehensive surveillance so that we can harness the benefit of technologies, best practices in all countries around the world in order to provide the services that are expected by the membership. Those are only some examples of the major work that we are anticipating in the months to come, and it's an investment that will deliver fruit in the next many years, we hope. I'll give you the general principle. For various reasons, and as a general principle, we believe that removing fossil fuel subsidies is the right way to go. If you look at our numbers from 2015, it's no less than about $5.2 trillion that are spent on fuel subsidies and the consequences thereof. And the Fiscal Affairs Department has actually identified, how much would have been saved fiscally, but also in terms of human life, if there had been the right price on carbon emission as of 2015. Numbers are quite staggering. If that was to happen, then there would be more public spending available to build hospitals, to build roads, to build schools, and to support education and health for the people. Now, how this is done is the more complicated path, because there has to be a social protection safety net that is in place so that the most exposed in the population do not take the brunt of those removal of subsidies principle. So that's the position we take. I would add as a footnote, as far as Nigeria is concerned, that with the low revenue mobilization that exists in the country, in terms of tax to GDP, Nigeria is amongst the lowest. A real effort has to be done in order to maintain a good public finance situation for the country, and in order to direct investment towards health, education, and infrastructure.
Christine Lagarde, the Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund. Let's take a break. We'll finish off on our market straight.